Joe, in the manufacturing space, you've talked about some go-to-market through channel and whatnot, but how do you approach territories and lead routing and whatnot when it's a combination of direct and channel?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because territories are in flux. As RevOps leaders, we know every year we're going to make some kind of territory update, tweak, change. Maybe it's redrawing the lines a little bit. Maybe it's shifting the focus of our teams to direct versus indirect. And that's where, having the ability to build out a solid territory model becomes important. So for us, we use geography as our territory model currently. I'm also looking at how do we now leverage industries and other verticals to be able to say, if our territory model shifts, do we have a direct engagement that's more vertical based versus an indirect engagement that's more geographic based? And having those overlapping territories is sort of where it is. So for our perspective, your question was about sort of how do we manage that lead routing? It's all about attribution. We did a lot of work with regards to our marketing automation platform and being able to do really good, solid attribution to where those things are coming from. And based on where the lead is coming in from, whether it's a trade show, whether it's a white paper, whether it's form fill, request a quote, whatever it is, right? A hand raiser of some kind, depending on where that's coming from, we've built a really robust lead routing program using Traction Complete to be able to disseminate those leads to the different individuals. We today will route either to our channel partners or to our internal inside sales team or to specific sales reps who are vertically aligned, all based on the attribution data that we get within the lead itself. I will also add there, what's incredibly important is building an infrastructure that allows you to easily hand those off from one of those groups to another, because it's very common that a lead may come in looking like one thing, and after those initial conversations may turn into something else, and you've got to make sure that you're not letting that lead cool off as you hand it from one group to another.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. And now you have a further level of complexity when you're going through these mergers and acquisitions, that those regular annual territory changes probably get more complex. How do you kind of approach that when you're now interweaving teams and different go-to-markets, et cetera?
Yeah, that becomes probably, that's part of that human transition, especially because when you're talking about leads, you're talking about opportunities for earning, and people have real feelings about what puts money on their bank account, right?
Yeah.
And what puts food on their tables. So what you have to do is really be sure that that ROE that we talked about is very well defined. And that's part of your go-to-market strategy is how are we going to market? Where are things going to fall? And what's the impact going to be to everyone? And then from the perspective of the M&A point of view, now what you're looking at is other companies that have done different ROE, right? So from that perspective, now you've got to homogenize the pools of engagement so that everybody feels that things are fair. We are doing right now a lot of work to just understand the different go-to-market engagements. We know for us internally, for example, the different brands that are under the umbrella now have very different go-to-market strategies. Like there are some that are 100% direct. They will never go through a partner. They're just two large machines. They're custom built for every configuration. They get sent out directly and they're working direct with the customers. That wouldn't work for, say, some of our desktop printers. But some of our larger industrial printers, that's where we do have some overlap. So from that perspective, it's really about getting down to understanding you are going to have 2 to 3 go-to-market strategies, and it's okay. It is okay. You will get through it.
Nice. Okay. So when you're preparing to go through this annual or biannual territory changes, how does RevOps kind of support the sales teams in generating or preparing or supplying data to make all those decisions?
Typically what I look at is I like to look at the last 3 years. And a couple of years ago, this was a problem for everybody across the world, right? Because within that 3 years included an entire year that most of the world was locked down, and it completely changed the way that we all looked at how we were going to spend money, how we were going to do business. So as you look back at that 36 months, which is usually a pretty good indicator of where your company is today. I mean, it used to be that I would say 5 years. I wouldn't say 5 years now because that 2020 year, 2021, those were just different years for business. We can't usually necessarily use them. Smaller companies, they have a lot of fluctuation anyway. It really comes down to what's a set of data that is giving you a good indication of your current trajectory and the current state of the market. And that's really where you build as much supporting data around the anticipated models. And as a RevOps leader, it's important for you to also be able to find potential models for territory alignment that may not be completely visible. There's a great quote that I love from Ford that said, if I had asked the people what they wanted, they would have told me faster horses. It's very common for somebody to give you, okay, this is what I want because it's what I've done before. But it's important for us to be innovators in terms of understanding with the technology we have today, with the systems we have, which are far greater than they were 5 years ago, just across the board, what can we do now that gives us even more opportunity to get into those market segments that we might have had buried underneath some other go-to-market model and territory model.
That's super smart. Any examples you have on how you've been able to do that?
I would say it's mostly around how are we driving visibility into our industry verticals. So we've, as I mentioned, have been largely geographic. We're doing a lot of work right now about how do we better enrich our data so that we can properly get set on what our key customer verticals are. In the past, it was sort of big picture key, that we were looking at factory floor and factory floor support and food and beverage. And these are just big, massive buckets. Well, now we've got the ability to get a little more targeted within those buckets and make sure that we've got specialists in each of those categories. And from a territory planning perspective, now what we're doing is we're starting to hire people who are industry specialists, and that changes your sales engagement. So if you've got somebody who's very good at selling your product, they can go in and talk to anyone. If you've got somebody who knows the industry they're selling into, they're going to use words and phrases and things that actually track for the people they're talking to, which means they're going to be better at selling you their product than someone who just is good at the product.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I've heard of different ideas for territory planning. So one is just based on success of sales reps and try and load them up and kind of waterfall down from there. I feel like that would be tough though for those reps who are brand new and they don't have the success in the past to prove their worth, kind of thing.
And with geographic, you can certainly go by saying where is our highest concentration of sales. What I really like about the industry component is that you're starting to target your engagement 100% across the board on that. And that from a territory planning perspective allows you to get super prescriptive about who you put into that space, not just who and what, not just what. And that's the big difference because your offerings can then be configured appropriately for the spaces you're working in. Not your entire portfolio might work in vertical A versus vertical B.
Sure. Yeah, it makes total sense. It seems like the broader, the more direct the focus and the more of an expert folks can become in that focus, the more all of their message will resonate, the more stories they'll have from other lookalike customers, that kind of thing.
Solution selling.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So looking forward, any anticipated territory changes that you'd like to put in place to see that kind of continue to evolve and grow?
I think really the big one for us right now, and I keep harping on it a little bit, but it's really this transition out of strictly geography to actually driving towards more of these verticals. This is a new space for us to be in. It's one I've been in previous lives before. I've seen it very successful, and I think that our portfolio here has a lot of alignment with this, and that's something that we're literally in the thick of right now. We're building out all the data models to be able to show what a territory break starts to look like as we look at this across the verticals. And we're using different tools to be able to capture those and collect those together to look at the geography verticals, the geography alignment over the industry verticals, and start to see how we can carve that stuff out. And if there's places where it makes sense for us to move away from channel management and into more direct engagement.